There's a flower blooming in cottage gardens right now, tall, elegant, and oh so blurple. It looks downright quaint until you learn it could kill you with just a touch. It's known as the Queen of Poisons, the Devil's Helmet, and the root of countless legends. Throughout history, it's been known to anoint weapons, conjure werewolves, and possibly send a few nobles to some suspiciously early graves. I'm Megan Brame, and on this episode of The History of Plants, we're diving into the dark and tangled story of the Aconitum genus, a group of over 200 species, better known as Monkshood or wolfsbane, or maybe just that plant you really shouldn't touch without gloves. This family has haunted history, medicine, and mythology for more than 2,000 years. It's deadly, yes, but it's also enduring. And it's left a botanical footprint on everything from Greek tragedy to Halloween horror movies. But before it became a favorite of gothic gardening and fantasy werewolves, it was something much stranger, a secret weapon, a legal controversy, and a misunderstood symbol of transformation. This episode's a little different because instead of just covering one plant, I'm going to be covering a whole family because they all share a long, toxic track record of helping and harming humans. The Aconitum genus contains about 250 species, some called wolfsbane, some called leopardsbane, others devil's helmet, but I'll mostly call it monkshood or aconite since it seems that's what most garden guides and botanists prefer. But don't worry, we will get to the werewolf wolfsbane stuff later. Whatever name you use, this genus belongs to the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae, one of the oldest and weirdest branches of the eudicoats. Real quick, eudicoats are a massive group of flowering plants. If you've ever admired a rose, eaten a bean, or watered a cactus, you've met a eudicoat. Scientists believe the buttercup family branched off somewhere between 121 and 114 million years ago. However, there's a theory called the accelerated angiosperm evolution hypothesis, which suggests flowering plants may have diversified earlier than we think. So that whole evolutionary timeline, it's still subject to change. But for now, this is the best map we've got. Sadly, monkshood doesn't leave behind dramatic fossil stems or roots like begonias or henbane, so its lineage is a little more muddy. What we do know is that Aconitum split from its closest relatives about 24.7 million years ago, and pollen from the late Miocene places it in Central Europe over 5 million years ago. Once settled into those alpine ecosystems, it began splitting into new species across Europe between 6.4 and 2.5 million years ago. That's a lot of kind of history to keep in your head. But my point is today, you'll still find it in those same misty meadows and forest edges where it first started all of those million years ago, tucked among other beautiful killers like deadly nightshade, foxglove, and white hellebore. Now here comes the messy part. One of the problems we have tracing monkshood evolution is that it doesn't evolve in a straight line like a well-behaved family tree. Its path through the European mountains is more like a tangle of vines, twisting, splitting, rejoining, and occasionally stealing from its neighbors. For starters, Aconitum species exist in both diploid, 2 sets of chromosomes, and tetraploid, 4 sets of chromosomes, forms. When those types interbreed, it leads to even more variation, opening the door for hybridization where 2 species mix together, which, if you remember from a previous episode, is how we got coffee. It also shows signs of horizontal gene transfer, where genetic material jumps sideways between species, which is unusual for plants to begin with and extra unusual in the wild. This has led to a bizarre situation where some monkshoods in Europe have leaves and flowers that look totally different above ground, but carry the exact same chloroplast DNA below the surface. Even more confusing, some monkshoods are phylogenetically incongruent, which means different parts of their DNA tell different evolutionary stories. One gene says, "I'm alpine." Another insists, "I'm from the Black Sea." It's like their genome is full of conflicting Wikipedia edits that no one ever resolved. To make matters messier, some high mountain tetraploids likely evolved right there in the Alps or Tatras from now extinct local ancestors. Others trace their lineage back to the Caucasus or even the Himalayas. So monkshood is both hyperlocal and globally entangled. All of this adds up to one incredibly slippery evolutionary footprint. Okay, science break over. Are you still awake or totally confused? I get it. Here's the takeaway. This tangled, rebellious plant family didn't just pick up a bad reputation from myth and media. It earned it. Through millions of years of evolution and cross-species meddling, Aconitum became one of the most chemically potent genera on Earth, and its danger isn't exaggerated. It's built in. Aconite has been feared, revered, and weaponized across continents for over 2 millennia. One of the earliest uses comes from ancient China and Tibet, where it was known as wuto, meaning blackhead, or thusta, roughly meaning attached child, likely referring to its tuber offshoots. Here, warriors would dip arrowheads into aconite pastes or decoctions, creating fast-acting poisons strong enough to bring down large game or human enemies. The Chinese weren't alone, though. In the Indian subcontinent, we find one of the earliest written references to plant poison when Aconitum-tipped arrows appear in the Rig Veda, a Sanskrit text dating back more than 3,000 years. Aconitum violaceum appears in the Charaka Samhita, a foundational Ayurvedic text compiled sometime between 100 BCE and 200 CE. It lists aconite among a special group of toxic plants known as visha, poisons that could be transformed into powerful medicines if processed correctly. The detoxification process, known as shodhana, was so important that over 200 Ayurvedic texts reference it. Even today, aconite still appears in some traditional formulations, like Yunnan Baiyao, a Chinese herbal remedy that includes processed wuto. Across the Himalayas, aconite remained a powerful weapon of choice. The Monaro people in Ladakh used Aconitum napellus to tip hunting arrows for ibex. In Japan, the Ainu and Matagi hunters coated their weapons with Aconitum to bring down bears. Further east, Aleut hunters in the Alaskan archipelago used poison-tipped lances to kill whales, paralyzing them with aconite so that they would drown mid-ocean. However, it was really the ancient Greeks who ran wild with monkshood lore and use. Greek botanist Theophrastus, writing around 300 BCE, called it Aconitum, a name likely derived from the Greek akone, meaning dart. His writing emphasized the root's power to kill swiftly and silently. Later, Dioscorides advised in De Materia Medica that Aconitum lycoctonum was particularly useful for poisoning wolves and other wild beasts. Pliny the Elder claimed that monkshood sprang from the frothing jaws of Cerberus, the three-headed hellhound who guarded the gates of Hades, which, if you think about it, is exactly the kind of origin story you would want for a murder plant. Ovid, writing in Metamorphoses, gives a more poetic version. Cerberus, delirious and enraged, spewed white poison film from his mouths, which seeped into the soil and sprouted into the deadly plant. Speaking of Greek mythology, some accounts say Athena used aconite to transform Arachne into a spider. Some tales fold Medea into the mix, saying she tried to poison Theseus with wine-laced wolfsbane, a classic move from sorceresses with a reputation for toxic problem-solving. Monkshood also found a powerful ally in Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic, thresholds, and the dead. Rituals dedicated to her often included torchlight processions, black dogs, and poisonous herbs like monkshood offered at crossroads or tombs. In Germanic folklore, monkshood went by the name Sturmhut, or Thor's hat, a plant sacred to the god of thunder. Its tall spires and helmet-shaped flowers were said to resemble Thor's battle helm, and it was often planted as a ward against storms, curses, and evil forces. Another name, Luperwurz, from the Old High German lupi, literally meant deathly juice or poison. And yes, wolfsbane wasn't just a poetic name. Both the Greeks and Germans reportedly used aconite-baited meat and poison-tipped arrows to kill wolves. It's even said that some water sources may have been laced to protect livestock from predators. The word lycoptonum meant wolf killer, and it wasn't just a metaphor, it was field-tested. Also, if you like your botany with a side of werewolf lore and historical murder, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. Over time, monkshood's violent effects gave rise to supernatural associations, especially with werewolves. Legends held that monkshood could repel or reveal shapeshifters, particularly those under a lycanthropic curse. In some versions, hanging a bundle of monkshood over the doorway could protect a household from nocturnal intruders, including vampires, which is probably why the 1931 film Dracula has Van Helsing tell a nurse to hang sprigs of wolfsbane around Mina's neck to ward off the vampire. Others brewed into potions or ointments to reveal those hiding in monstrous forms. Its bitter smell and toxic touch were said to be unbearable to anything unnatural. The association ran so deep that monkshood became inseparable from werewolf mythology. It wasn't just believed to protect against werewolves, it was rumored to create them. Some tales warned that handling the plant under a full moon or mixing it into the wrong potion could trigger a transformation. So, depending on the tale, monkshood was either your best defense against supernatural threats or the very thing that made them worse. By Imperial Rome and into the Middle Ages, aconite was the go-to poison for assassins, witches, and anyone looking to solve a problem quietly. It appears in Byzantine court records where nobles sometimes died suspiciously after a shared meal. Later, Renaissance medical manuals like De Vernanis by Girolamo Mercuriali and Opera Omnia Medico-Chemica by Oswald Kroll described aconite as both medicine and murder weapon, emphasizing its stealth and speed. Once ingested, symptoms could easily be mistaken for natural causes. Poison was, practically trending in the 16th century, making the powerful resort to drastic measures just to stay alive. According to one account, Pope Clement VII fed aconite-laced marzipan to 2 prisoners to test a potential antidote. Only one received the treatment. The other one died in agony. Later, starting in the Renaissance and sticking around well into the modern era, Aconitum was rumored to be one of the ingredients in witches' flaying ointments. Those ointments often included a who's who of poisonous plants: belladonna, henbane, mandrake, and monkshood. It's also around this time that we find the first printed use of the English word wolfsbane. In 1548, botanist William Turner included it in the name of herbs, translating it directly from the Latin lycognitum. He originally applied it to Aconitum acognitum, a yellow-flowered cousin of Aconitum napellus, but most of the legends, shapeshifters, the assassinations, the Gothic horror, those stuck to napellus, the iconic blue flower still haunting gardens today. In 1597, English herbalist John Gerard devoted an entire section of the herbal to monkshood, calling it very deadly and warning no antidote is known to counter its effects. Half a century later, Nicholas Culpeper, the astrologer-physician behind the 1653 book The Complete Herbal, doubled down, calling aconite an herb of Saturn and aligning it with death, cold, and misfortune. His advice? Use it not inwardly, but only in magical and outward applications, because violent nature could easily destroy instead of heal. Meanwhile, aconite quietly threaded its way through real family tragedies. Letters, confessions, and inquisitorial records mention blue flowers at the center of inheritance disputes, rival romances, and sudden illnesses. The plant wasn't always named, but the symptoms and the suspicious timing left little doubt. And yet, despite all of that, we still find records of monkshood growing peacefully in monastery gardens. Even today, wolfsbane shows up as a kind of magical shorthand throughout some of our most famous media, showing our constant push and pull with its significance. Let's start with literature. Shakespeare, who never missed a chance for botanical drama, alludes to it in Hamlet when Laertes prepares a mortal unction to anoint his blade, a move many scholars believe was inspired by aconite-tipped weapons. In the 1943 novel Our Lady of the Flowers, a character eats aconite so that Renaissance could take possession of the child through the mouth. Aleister Crowley used it as an analogy in his writings for the power of divine communication. In Harry Potter, it's an ingredient in the wolfsbane potion used to help werewolves maintain their sanity during the full moon. It's a callback to that ancient belief that this plant could suppress or expose what was lurking beneath. For visual media, it is a long list. I mentioned already the 1931 film Dracula, but we see it again a decade later when another classic horror, 1941's The Wolfman, introduced the rhyme, "Even a man who's pure in heart and says his prayers at night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright." Dexter featured a character who poisoned multiple people with aconite. In You, Love Quinn kills her husband using wolfsbane grown in the garden. The Vampire Diaries, Teen Wolf, Game of Thrones, Merlin, The Witcher, the Korean drama Daejang-gyeom, and dozens of other fantasy media all turn to aconite as the perfect plot poison. There's even a Marvel superhero named Wolfsbane, a mutant who transforms into a werewolf. Wolfsbane became a universal symbol of transformation, dread, and defense, sometimes all at once. Deadly to touch, useful in the right hands, sacred in some rituals, suspicious in others. Yet beneath all of the legends, the real reason it terrified people was far more insidious, hiding in every part of its chemistry. Let's talk about what actually happens when monkshood gets inside your system. So, how does this flower kill you? All members of the Aconitum genus contain aconitine, a deadly alkaloid that attacks the nervous system. In a healthy body, your nerve cells are supposed to fire in carefully controlled bursts, opening sodium channels just long enough to send messages like, move your hand, or you're standing on a Lego. Aconitine throws a wrench into that system. It locks those sodium channels open, flooding the nerves with signals that don't shut off. The result? Muscle convulsions, tingling, numbness, sweating, vomiting. When it hits your heart, that is when there's no turning back because the aconitine disrupts cardiac sodium channels too, throwing off your heart's rhythm. You can go from palpitations to full heart failure in under an hour. And that's how narrow the therapeutic window is. But what's horrifying is that apparently you stay conscious through most of it. Survivors of aconitine poisoning often describe it as a slow descent into paralysis, fully aware, fully lucid, and completely helpless. And it doesn't take much. Less than 1 milligram of pure aconitine can be fatal. And the worst part? You don't even have to digest it. Cases of skin absorption have been documented just from handling the roots without gloves. Even today, there is no specific antidote. Modern treatment focuses more on supportive care, stabilizing the heart, managing symptoms, and hoping the body metabolizes the poison in time. Survival depends on dose, timing, and honestly, sheer luck. It's not the kind of thing you walk off. And if you think this sounds theatrical, like you're in some kind of Victorian poisoner's fantasy, you're actually right. In 19th century Scotland, Dr. Edward Pritchard poisoned both his wife and mother-in-law. He slipped aconite and antimony into their medicines and desserts, then claimed they died naturally. But what gave him away? Thankfully, the aconite left traces in the opium syrup and tapioca pudding. It was enough to convict him, and he became the last person ever publicly hanged in Scotland. Not to be outdone by the Scottish, English had its own Dr. Death. William Palmer, also a 19th century physician, was accused of murdering multiple people for insurance payouts. While strychnine got most of the press, witnesses pointed to aconite and antimony in his toxic toolbox. Even without conclusive lab results, the pattern of sudden deaths sealed his fate. It didn't stop with Victorian poisoners, of course. In Japan, a murder for insurance ring operated in the early 2000s. Their weapon of choice were sweet bean buns laced with monkshood. 3 women and 1 man were convicted after authorities linked the poison to multiple family deaths. It's the chemistry that made these crimes possible. Undetectable taste and fast-acting effects with symptoms that mimic natural illnesses. Even today, if the dose is low enough, it can be really hard to prove aconite poisoning. And yet, here's the paradox again. Aconitine isn't just a killer. It is a complex chemical with potential therapeutic uses. In the 18th and 19th century, aconite extracts were prescribed for everything from gout to trigeminal neuralgia. It showed up in liniments, tinctures, and pills until too many people died from it. Yet there's still potential in well-managed doses. Researchers have investigated its role in pain management, particularly for severe neuralgia or arthritis. Traditional Chinese medicine still uses processed forms of aconite in some prescriptions. Pharmacologists have studied aconitine's interactions with ion channels to gain a better understanding of how nerves function. This duality, lethal in one dose and medicinal in another, is what made aconitum such a permanent fixture in both folklore and pharmacology. It's a plant that forces choice, weapon or medicine. And that's always dependent on the person holding the bottle. Today, most people don't worry about accidentally brushing against a murder plant on their way to brunch. But monkshood hasn't disappeared. It's just changed tactics. It may not headline poison trials or cloak witches in flying ointments anymore, but aconitum is still a quiet and dangerous poison. Cases of monkshood poisoning continue to show up in emergency rooms, mostly due to foragers mistaking it for edible roots like horseradish or wild parsley. And while you're unlikely to stumble across aconitine in your tea anymore, the plant's potent chemistry still finds its way into making bad times even worse. During the COVID-19 pandemic, authorities in China had to crack down on folk remedies containing improperly processed aconite after a spike in hospitalizations and at least 1 death linked to people self-medicating. One traditional preparation called Sawu wine was so toxic that its sale became temporarily banned in several provinces. But despite its toxicity, monkshood isn't going extinct anytime soon. Well, maybe. Aconitum napellus, the iconic blue-flowered variety, is currently listed as least concerned on the IUCN Red List. Its wild populations are stable and even increasing in many areas with no major threats reported. But that's not the whole story. Other members of the genus are in real trouble. Aconitum napellus subspecies corsicum is considered vulnerable in parts of France. Up in the Himalayas, species like Aconitum chasmanthem are critically endangered, while Aconitum heterophyllum is endangered and Aconitum violaceum, the one mentioned in the ancient Ayurvedic texts, is listed as vulnerable. Habitat loss and overharvesting have pushed some of these plants dangerously close to disappearing. Oh, and then there's the bees. Monkshood has a peculiar shape that makes it hard for shorter-tongued bees like the honeybee to pollinate it, so it relies heavily on long-tongued bumblebees that have the right shape and strength to access its deep nectaries. But here's the problem. Many of these bees are in decline due to their habitat loss, pesticides, and climate disruption. In a way, monkshood represents more than just a chemical threat. It's a symbol of everything plants can be: powerful, unpredictable, and easy to underestimate. It reminds us that beauty and danger often share the same complex roots embedded in our history. Every time you see a wolfsbane potion in a fantasy novel or hear someone say a garden looks a little witchy, you're tapping into a legacy that's thousands of years old. So, the next time you see a tall, elegant flower with helmet-shaped plumes and a suspiciously poetic nickname, maybe don't touch it. Or at least, wear gloves. I'm Megan Frame. Thanks for joining me on another episode of The History of Plants. You can learn about what didn't make it into this episode by checking out the commentary on Patreon, but before you go, we're sticking to the theme of botanical danger, so click here to learn how henbane went from ritual plant to nightmare fuel that made witches fly, caused Roman men to panic, and helped a wayward husband get rid of his wife. Until next time, greenies, stay curious, and don't forget to flourish.